There's a challenge on campus that happens every year. It's called the Do Good Challenge. And one of the students, he proposed Food Recovery Network, and Maryland adopted it because he won the challenge. I think it was 2013 or 2014. And then it spread since then. I don't know how many chapters we have, but all across the United States.
So the goal of Food Recovery Network is basically to eliminate food waste here on the University of Maryland's campus.
We take the leftover food from dining halls and campus events and we donate it to homeless shelters and other food redistribution centers so that the food doesn't go to waste and that hungry people get to eat the food that we don't eat here.
The volunteers come every day. We have the staff bring all the food that's left over into the back of the kitchen.
What we do is we take it out of the pans they bring it into us. We have a big group of volunteers, 3 to 7 people, plus a recovery leader from Food Recovery Network. So we take the food out of the pans that the dining hall gives us. The volunteers put it in the pans that we provide to take to the shelter.
And then we load it all up onto a shuttle that's provided by the university for free, and we take that food to a local church who then distributes that food to organizations and homeless shelters.
I did the weighing and putting down what food it is and how much each pan weighs so that we can put it into the food recovery website so that we can log how many pounds we're actually getting and what types of food we're getting.
This is our way of basically putting a dent in the amount of food that is wasted in our community.
Everything kind of is like a clock, and so all the cogs need to be working. When we don't have one of our cogs, the whole clock explodes.
So sometimes it's difficult if we don't have enough volunteers. Sometimes they don't show up. The bus sometimes doesn't show up because there's a miscommunication with the transportation services. But other than that, people are really willing to just on a dime run over here and help out. So it's usually saved by the end of the night.
We have roughly 15 recoveries a week. Our latest ones are from one of our diners. Those start at 11:40 p.m. and go to about 12:30 in the morning because we have to go in once the dining halls are already closed. The dining hall recovery is where we get definitely the bulk of our food, but there are also like different venues across campus that give us a fair amount.
I think food waste is a huge issue that needs to be addressed, but the fact that there is so much food that is perfectly good that could be eaten by kids, by people who just need dinner, you know, so much of that food gets wasted, and that's what we need. It has a very simple solution. And that is just to package up what would be lost, what would be thrown away, and to give it to those who are hungry and in need of it. It's just one of those volunteer opportunities where you really get to see the type of impact that you make, and I enjoy that.
And there's a lot of little things you can do in your day-to-day life. Like don't buy more food than you're going to eat in a week is a big one. Try to donate any leftover boxed food you might have to a food bank, something like that, non-perishables. You can volunteer with homeless shelters or food redistribution centers or Food Recovery Network.
There are plenty of companies that sell produce that would be otherwise thrown into a landfill.
And I always believe that being on a university's campus as a student is the best place for you to start to make an impact. There's so many opportunities. So when I heard about Food Recovery Network, I thought that was a pretty tangible way to see the impact that you can make on any given night.
It's feeding hungry people. We recover upwards of 300 pounds of food each night that otherwise would have been thrown away. You physically can see the difference you're making in Food Recovery Network, which is really rare for volunteer groups.
Across cultures, desserts and other sweets accompany celebration and help bring people closer together. Let's take a look at some desserts from around the world.
The East Coast has seen a dramatic increase in deer population over the past few decades. In Rock Creek Park, the deer population has gone from almost none in the 1960s to 55 deer per square mile in 2017. This has had an adverse effect on vegetation in the park.
We've had about 3 decades of very high deer populations, and the reasons are that the deer don't have predators here, and that we have created really nice habitat for them. Deer really love edge habitats in suburban environments, and the edges of forests and the edges of development, and that has been increasing in this area over the past decades.
In 2013, the National Park Service began a deer management plan to curb the white-tailed deer population in the park. During the winter months, the park implemented deer culling, where sharpshooters from the U.S. Department of Agriculture would kill deer in order to control the population.
A number of roads are closed off, and the sharpshooters are in the park, and they will remove as many deer as are needed to get to this optimal level, which is 15 to 20 per square mile. The venison that comes from deer management is donated to food pantries in the district, primarily the DC Central Kitchen, and over the past 5 or so years, more than 7,000 pounds of meat have been donated.
We saw Rock Creek Park as a sanctuary, actually, a place where they never had killed any wildlife. They'd never allowed any killing of wildlife. And the way we got people was we just went out and had rallies. We had a rally the first time they killed deer. We only had 4 hours to prepare for it and advertise it, but one of our members was really, really good at painting huge banners that we could use. And so we got out that night. Got out with a rally, and a lot of people joined us, and we kept it up every night for a while.
In 2012, Save the Rock Creek Deer filed suit against the National Park Service on the basis that the deer management program violated the park's ban on hunting.
The courts decided against us.
That we're doing the deer management in the first place is to allow the forest to be healthy and have regeneration. And what that means is the deer were having a lot of impacts on vegetation and tree seedlings, most especially. So they're eating all those little trees that were going to grow up to be the forest of tomorrow. So if the park did not take any action, the forest over the long term would decline.
I think the real truth is, I think they have to reduce the population of deer because of the neighbors, not because of the park.
Well, the deer have been a problem for a number of years, but I have been in the garden for about 20 years, since the late 1990s, and they were, during that time frame in the 90s, were becoming increasingly problematic, getting into the garden, eating vegetables and plants that gardeners had planted.
We're trying to take this action in a way that allows the forest to recover and all the animals that depend on that forest. So it's not just plants and trees, it's rabbits and flying squirrels and foxes and all the other animals that live in the park depend on that vegetation.
The Park Service's population control program was based off of a study by the U.S. Geological Survey detailing the damage to vegetation caused by the deer. Skeptical of the Park Service's conclusion, Save the Rock Creek Deer asked an expert to reanalyze the data collected by the survey.
We had this professor from Yale University, who's very well known internationally, look at it, and he said, no, but they did not show that the deer were harming the park. They did show that deer eat plants, but we already knew that.
At Catoctin Mountain Park, deer management has been ongoing for 9 years, and they have seen a 10-fold increase, so 10 times more seedlings in their forest since they've been managing deer. So we know it can work.
The Asylum, located in a quiet town somewhere in the U.S., once hosted hundreds of patients for rehabilitation. but now it is better known for the horrors that occurred within. The asylum opened in 1925 as a treatment facility for the mentally ill. It featured 22 buildings on a 200-acre property sheltered by a dense forest. The patients initially had access to a theater, gym, rec center, chapel, and other amenities. There were also a number of residential cottages available to those who could care for themselves. The institution was a beacon of hope for many mentally ill and their families, who struggled to find adequate care at a time where stigma surrounded the issue of mental health. As the years passed by, the asylum failed to live up to the idealistic dreams of the founders. Many problems arose from a lack of funding and staff, including numerous cases of mental, physical, and sexual abuse. Additionally, a large portion of the patients were incorrectly diagnosed and forced to stay at the asylum against their will. Those trapped included the deaf, illiterate, epileptic, and orphaned. In 1968, an 8-year-old girl was admitted to the asylum by her parents. In 1976, she choked to death after being fed lying down. This was just one of many neglectful practices of the asylum. The following legal action from her parents led to the eventual closing of the asylum and relocation of the remaining inhabitants. The asylum officially shut its doors in 1991, but not before 387 patients had lost their lives. Their bodies lie at the Garden of Eternal Rest, a gravesite not far from the institution. While originally unmarked, families have since paid for a mass gravestone with the names of their loved ones. Years after its closing, the asylum remains standing in a state of disrepair. At the mercy of nature, the rotting structures are a testament to the decades of suffering that took place within its walls. It sits waiting for the next wanderer to uncover its dark secrets.